On the morning they were to judge Shamash Etir for the murder of his brother, the dead man walked through the gate of Ur. At first, nobody recognized him. He had lost weight. His beard had grown wild around his face, and one side of his head had been shaved where a long wound had healed badly. His robe was the rough brown cloth of a laborer, not the dyed wool of a wealthy merchant. But the gatekeeper knew the ring on his hand. It was gold, set with a small black stone carved with a lion. The gatekeeper stared at it, then at the man's face, then back at the ring. "Belzeri?" The man stopped. Behind him, a donkey bumped impatiently against a basket of onions. The gatekeeper dropped the tablet he had been holding. Within moments, 3 people were running toward the courthouse. One was shouting, one was laughing, and one was praying aloud. Because Belzeri, merchant of wool, cedar oil, copper, and fine cloth, had vanished 7 months earlier on the southern road, his mule had been found dead beside an irrigation ditch. His blood had been found on a stone. His traveling cloak had been discovered 3 days later in the reeds. And his younger brother, Shamash Etir, had been arrested for his murder. The judgment was to be given before noon. By the time Belzeri reached the courthouse, half the market seemed to be following him. A guard ran inside. There was shouting. The doors opened, and Shamash Etir came out between 2 soldiers. For 7 months he had protested his innocence. For 7 months he had said the same thing. "I did not kill my brother." That morning, for the first time, he had proof. His brother was standing 20 paces away, alive. Shamash Etir did not move. Neither did Belzeri. People began whispering. Then Shamash Etir laughed once. It was not a happy laugh. It was the sound a man makes when his body has forgotten what else to do. "You are alive." Belzeri looked at him. Shamash Etir stepped forward. The guards released his arms. "You are alive." Still, Belzeri said nothing. Then another person pushed through the crowd. A woman in a dark blue veil. Taram, Belzeri's wife. She had been the one who accused Shamash Etir. She had stood before the judges and said that her husband's brother had murdered him for his share of the family business. Now she stopped in the middle of the courtyard. Her husband looked at her. She pulled back her veil. For a moment she seemed unable to breathe. Then she whispered his name. Belzeri. He turned away, not from the crowd, not from the judges, from her. Taram took another step. "Where have you been?" He did not answer. Shamash Etir stared at him. "Tell them." Belzeri looked at his brother. "Tell them I did not do it." Belzeri remained silent. The courtyard became very still. Shamash Etir's smile disappeared. "You know I did not do it." Nothing. Taram said, "Why won't you speak?" Belzeri finally opened his mouth. His voice was rough. He had not used it much. "There is one person in this courtyard," he said, "whom I am willing to speak to." Everyone waited. Belzeri pointed, not at his wife, not at his brother, at an old woman selling dates near the courthouse wall. People turned toward her. The old woman looked behind herself, as though he might mean somebody else. Belzeri said, "Her." And that was how the trouble truly began. The old woman's name was Kubaba. Nobody important knew her. She sold dates, figs, and little cakes of sesame near the judge's courtyard because people waiting for legal matters became hungry, and hungry people were careless with small coins. When 2 guards brought her inside, she complained the entire way. "I have a basket outside. We will watch it. You will eat it. We will not. You already have the face of a man who steals dates." The guard looked offended. Kubaba looked at Belzeri. Then her mouth closed. "You?" Belzeri nodded. Taram noticed it. "You know my husband?" Kubaba did not answer her. One of the judges leaned forward. "Belzeri, you were believed murdered. Your brother stands accused of your death. You have returned on the morning of his judgment. Explain yourself." Belzeri looked at Kubaba. "Tell them what you told me at the well." The old woman frowned. "You crossed half the country and returned to Babylon so I could speak for you." Belzeri said nothing. Kubaba sighed. "Rich men, always paying scribes because they cannot manage their own mouths." A few people laughed. The judge did not. "What happened at the well?" Kubaba looked around the chamber. At Taram, at Shamashatir, at several merchants who had been summoned for the judgment, and finally at a tall man standing near the rear wall. Nadinu, Taram's elder brother. He had stayed close to his sister since Belzeri disappeared. He was the person who had helped her collect witnesses, the person who had accompanied her when she made the accusation, the person who had sat beside her through every hearing. Kubaba looked at him slightly longer than the others. Then she began. 7 months ago, I was traveling north with my daughter's family. Near Dilbat, we stopped beside an old well. We found this man lying behind the stones. She pointed at Belzeri. He had dried blood all over his head. He could barely see. He could not remember his own name. Taram covered her mouth. Shamash Etir said, "What?" Kubaba continued, "My son-in-law wanted to leave him. We had children with us, and a wounded stranger can bring trouble." "That is true," said Kubaba's son-in-law from somewhere in the crowd. Everyone turned. He immediately stopped speaking. Kubaba continued, "But the wounded man grabbed my wrist. He was wearing a good ring, so I decided he was probably worth saving." Belzeri almost smiled. Kubaba pointed at him. For many weeks, he remembered almost nothing. Sometimes pieces returned, a warehouse, a blue door, a woman singing while grinding spices, 2 boys fighting over a wooden boat. Shamash Etir looked at his brother. They had owned a wooden boat when they were children. Shamash Etir had broken it over Belzeri's head. Their father had beaten them both because neither would admit who had started the fight. Kubaba said, "Then one morning he saw a trader's cylinder seal. It had a lion carved into it. He looked at his own ring." She pointed at the black stone, and he remembered Babylon. Taram whispered, "Why didn't you come home?" Belzeri's face changed. Not much, but enough. Kubaba answered instead. He tried. Now even Nadinu was listening closely. Kubaba said, "That is where the strange part begins." The first thing Belzeri remembered clearly was his wife's name, Taram. The second was his brother's. The third was money. Not his money, missing money. He had been sitting outside Kubaba's daughter's house when the memories came. A clay tablet, a caravan account, 3 shipments of purple cloth from the coast, copper delivered to Ur, silver that should have returned to Babylon, but had not. Belzeri had discovered the missing silver shortly before his journey south. At first he believed there was an error in the tablets. Then he compared the marks. Somebody had altered them. Not badly. Very well. Well enough that he might never have noticed if a caravan master had not complained about being paid twice for the same journey. Belzeri told only one person about it before leaving Babylon. His brother, Shamash Etir. He had said, "Do nothing while I am gone. I want to know where the silver is going." Shamash Etir had agreed, but 3 days later, before Belzeri even left the city, the brothers had argued publicly in their father's old warehouse. Several workers heard it. They heard Shamash Etir shout, "If you do this, you will regret it." And Belzeri answer, "If I regret anything, it will be trusting you for so long." Neither brother later explained what the argument was about. When Belzeri vanished, those words became important. Very important. Because Taram had heard about the missing silver too, not from her husband, from her brother Nadinu. Nadinu sometimes worked with Belzeri's caravans. He owned 2 carts, 4 mules, and more confidence than judgment. He also owed Belzeri a considerable amount of silver. When Belzeri disappeared, Nadinu came to Taram almost every day. He helped with the warehouse. He spoke to creditors. He calmed workers who feared the business was failing. And when Taram woke in the night, convinced she had heard her husband at the door, Nadinu sat in the courtyard until sunrise. For the first month, she believed Belzeri would return. During the second, she began to fear he would not. In the 3rd month, a shepherd brought something to the house, a leather pouch, Belzeri's. It had been found near the road south. Inside was a small clay tablet wrapped in cloth. The tablet contained a new division of the family business. If Belzeri died, control of the warehouses would pass not to his wife, but to Shamash Etir. Taram read it twice, then a 3rd time. She sent for a scribe. The scribe examined the seal. Belzeri's lion, authentic. She asked when the tablet had been written. The scribe estimated shortly before the journey. Taram felt something cold move through her. Belzeri had never told her. That night, Nadinu came to visit. She showed him the tablet. Her brother read it. Then he sat down. Taram. "What? Do you know about the argument?" "What argument?" Nadinu hesitated. That hesitation would return to Taram many times afterward. It looked at the time like a man reluctant to hurt his sister. I hoped it meant nothing. What argument? Belzeri and Shamash Etir. He told her what the workers had heard. "If you do this, you will regret it. If I regret anything, it will be trusting you." Taram still refused to accuse anyone, so Nadinu said nothing more. 2 weeks passed, then something else was found. A blood-stained belt. Shamash Etir's. It was discovered in a storage room belonging to the family business. Shamash Etir admitted the belt was his. He could not explain the blood. That was when Taram went to the judges. She did not scream. She did not call her brother-in-law a monster. She placed the tablet before them, then the belt, then gave the names of the workers who had heard the argument. Only when the judge asked what she believed had happened did she say, "I believe Shamash-Atir killed my husband." And Shamash-Atir had looked at her for a long time before saying, "If Belzeri is dead, then you have buried the wrong man in your heart." She had hated him for saying it. Now Belzeri was alive, and he was refusing to defend him. Kubaba finished telling the judges how Belzeri recovered his memory. The chief judge turned to him. "You were attacked?" Belzeri nodded. "By your brother?" Belzeri shook his head. Shamash-Atir closed his eyes. One of the judges said, "Then the charge of murder cannot stand." Another said, "Unless the accused arranged the attack." Shamash-Atir opened his eyes again. "Ask him." Belzeri remained quiet. His brother stared at him. "You returned to save me, did you not?" Belzeri looked down. That hurt Shamash-Atir more than if he had said no. The chief judge ordered the room cleared except for the family, Kubaba, several witnesses, and the court scribes. Outside, Babylon was already carrying the story from street to street. The dead merchant had returned. His wife had accused his brother falsely, and the dead man still would not say who had attacked him. Inside, Taram finally lost patience. "You are punishing us." Belzeri looked at her. "You think I do not know what this is?" He said nothing. "You disappear for 7 months. We find blood. We find your cloak. We find his belt. We find the tablet." "What tablet?" It was the first question he had asked her. Taram froze. Shamash-Atir looked at him. "The inheritance tablet." "What inheritance tablet?" Taram brought it from her bag. She had carried it to every hearing. Belzeri took it, read it, turned it over, then looked at his wife. "I never made this." Nobody spoke. Taram said, "Your seal is on it." "Yes." "You gave the warehouse to him." "No." She pointed at the lion mark pressed into the clay. "That is your seal." Belzeri raised his hand. The black stone was still on his ring. He looked at the impression, then at the ring. "Very good." "What?" "The copy." Shamash-Atir stepped closer. "Someone copied your seal?" Belzeri ignored him. He handed the tablet to Kubaba. "Do you remember the man at the well?" The old woman stared at him. "What man?" "The one who came asking questions." Kubaba's expression changed, and now the judges leaned forward. During Belzeri's recovery, a traveler had arrived at the village. He said he was searching for a missing cousin. He was polite. He carried dates for the children. He asked whether anyone had seen a wealthy merchant with a lion seal. Kubaba lied. She said no. "Why?" asked the judge. Kubaba shrugged. "I did not like his sandals." The judge stared at her. "His sandals?" "They were expensive." "So?" "He said he was a poor cousin." She looked annoyed that this required explanation. "A poor cousin can have one good robe. A poor cousin can borrow jewelry. But a poor cousin does not walk dusty roads in new leather sandals unless someone else paid for them." The stranger left. That night, Kubaba told Belzeri what had happened. He had remembered enough by then to understand that somebody was searching for him, somebody who did not know whether he was dead. Therefore he did not return to Babylon. Not yet. Instead, he sent a message to his brother. Shamash-Etir turned toward him. "You sent me nothing." "I know." Taram said softly. "How?" Belzeri looked at the judge. "I paid a potter traveling north. I told him to deliver a clay token into my brother's hand." "What was on it?" "Nothing but the shape of our childhood boat." Shamash-Etir's face went pale. "I never received it." Belzeri nodded. "That is when I knew somebody between me and my house was watching." The chief judge said, "Who?" Belzeri answered, "That is what I returned to discover." Shamash-Etir stared at him. "You let me sit in prison because you wanted to catch a thief?" Belzeri's eyes moved toward him. "No." "Then why?" Belzeri hesitated. "Because I did not know if you were only innocent of murder." The room went silent again. Shamash-Etir's face hardened. "What does that mean?" Belzeri finally looked directly at him. "It means the missing silver." Shamash-Etir said nothing. That was all Taram needed to see. "You knew about it." Her brother-in-law looked away. Belzeri said, "I asked you to watch the accounts." "I did." "And?" Shamash-Etir rubbed both hands over his face. "You want this now?" "I have wanted it for 7 months." A judge said, "Answer." Shamash-Etir took a long breath. "I took silver." Taram stepped backward. Belzeri did not. "How much?" 23 shekels. One of the scribes looked up sharply. It was enough to purchase several good slaves, many animals, or a modest house. Belzeri said, "Why?" Shamash-Etir looked at Taram, then at Nadinu. For the first time since Belzeri entered the courthouse, Nadinu looked uneasy. Shamash-Etir said, "Because someone had to pay your wife's brother's debts." Taram turned. "Nadinu?" Nadinu frowned. "This is nonsense." Shamash-Etir continued. "Your brother owed money to 3 lenders. One was threatening to seize his carts. Another wanted his house." Taram looked at Nadinu. "You told me the debts were settled." "They were." "By whom?" Nadinu's mouth tightened. Shamash-Etir answered, "By me." Taram stared at him. "Why?" That was the question nobody expected to be difficult, but Shamash-Etir did not answer immediately. Belzeri understood before Taram did. "You promised someone." Shamash-Etir nodded. "Father." Their father had been dead for almost 2 years. Belzeri said, "What promise?" Shamash-Etir gave a tired laugh. "A stupid one." "Tell me." Before father died, Nadinu came to him. Nadinu said, "Enough." Shamash-Etir looked at him. "I have spent 7 months waiting to unalive for your secrets. I think we have reached enough." And then Shamash-Etir told a story none of them had heard. 2 years earlier, when their father Adad-Malik was dying, Nadinu came to the old man's room late at night. Shamash-Etir happened to be there. Nadinu begged for money. He had borrowed to purchase a share in a caravan that never arrived. Some said the caravan had been robbed. Others said the man organizing it had simply disappeared. Nadinu's creditors were demanding repayment. Adad Malik had always liked Nadinu, perhaps because Nadinu had lost his own father young, perhaps because he made the old merchant laugh. Adad Malik agreed to help him, but he made Shamash Atir promise not to tell Belzeri. Why? Because Belzeri would refuse. Belzeri had already rescued Nadinu from 2 smaller debts. He must learn, Belzeri had said. Adad Malik disagreed. Men learn very little while drowning, he told Shamash Atir. First pull him from the river, teach him on the bank. So Shamash Atir promised. After their father's death, he discovered the debt was larger than Nadinu had admitted. He paid part of it from his own money, then part from the family business. He intended to return the silver before Belzeri noticed. He failed. Belzeri found the discrepancy. The brothers argued. "If you do this, you will regret it," Shamash Atir had shouted. He was not threatening murder. He was begging Belzeri not to report Nadinu to the judges. "If I regret anything, it will be trusting you for so long," Belzeri had answered. That explained the argument. But it created another question. Belzeri turned toward Nadinu. "If my brother paid your debts, why did money continue disappearing?" Nadinu said, "It did not." Belzeri looked at him. "Yes, it did." Taram slowly sat down. There had been one thief, then apparently another. Shamash Atir said, "After I paid him, the accounts were still wrong?" "Yes." "How much?" "More than you took." "How much more?" Belzeri gave the number. This time even the judges reacted. Nadinu laughed uneasily. "You have been wounded in the head." Belzeri looked at him. "So I have." "You remember numbers from months ago?" "Yes." "You could hardly remember your wife." Belzeri's voice stayed quiet. Numbers returned before faces. Nadinu shook his head. "This proves nothing." Belzeri agreed. "No." Then he reached inside his robe and placed a small object on the table, a broken piece of fired clay. On it was half the impression of a bird. Nadinu's face emptied, only for a moment. But Taram saw it. So did Belzeri. Taram whispered, "What is that?" Belzeri answered, "The reason I came home." 3 weeks after recovering enough to travel, Belzeri had gone back to the place where he was attacked. Not to Babylon. South. He traveled with Kubaba's son-in-law and 2 other men. The mule was gone. The blood had washed from the road. But the ditch remained. So did the reeds. Belzeri searched for 2 days. He found nothing. On the 3rd morning, Kubaba's son-in-law found a piece of clay beneath a thorn bush. It was part of a broken tablet. There was almost no writing left. Only half a seal, a bird with spread wings. Belzeri knew that seal. Years earlier, it had belonged to a caravan merchant named Mushalim. Mushalim was dead. His caravans were gone. His house had been sold. His sons had left Babylon. But Belzeri remembered something else. Mushalim was the man who had organized the caravan in which Nadinu had invested his borrowed money, the caravan that supposedly never arrived. Belzeri began asking questions. Slowly, not as himself. The wound and beard helped. He traveled as a laborer named Zaki. At an inn near Nippur, a stable boy remembered carts bearing the mark of Mushalim 2 years earlier. They had arrived from the south, loaded, not robbed, not missing, sold. The goods had been quietly divided among several men. One of those men was still alive. Belzeri found him repairing nets near a canal. The man refused to speak. Belzeri offered silver. The man refused again. Belzeri showed him the broken bird seal. Then the man said, "I wondered when somebody would come, asking." He explained that Mushalim's caravan had been a fraud. Investors in Babylon were told it disappeared. In reality, the goods were sold under different names. Most of the silver went to Mushalim, but Mushalim had a partner, a younger man from Babylon. The netmaker did not remember his name. He remembered his laugh. He remembered that the man had 2 fingers on his left hand, joined slightly at the base from birth. Everybody in the courtroom looked at Nadinu's left hand. He moved it behind his back. Taram closed her eyes. "No." Nadinu said, "Many men have such hands." The judge replied, "Fewer men with such hands also invested in Mushalim's caravan." Taram stood. "Nadinu." Her brother looked at her. "Tell me he is wrong." Taram, "Tell me." Nadinu did not. She walked to him, not angrily, almost gently. "You came to Father's house crying because you lost everything. I did lose everything. You were Mushalim's partner? No. You let Shamashatir pay debts that were not real? They were real. How?" Nadinu finally raised his voice. "Because Mushalim cheated me too." Everyone waited. Nadinu looked around as though the correct explanation might be hidden somewhere in the room. "I knew the caravan was going to be sold secretly. Yes, but Mushalim promised me a share. He kept it. He took the silver and left me with the creditors." Belzeri said, "Some of it." Nadinu looked at him. "What? You received some. You cannot know that. I found one of the men who paid you." Nadinu's eyes flickered. Belzeri continued, "You received enough to clear your debts. That is a lie. But instead you begged my father for money, then my brother." Nadinu pointed at Shamashatir. "He admits he stole from you. And because he did, I suspected him." Shamashatir laughed bitterly. At least somebody noticed. Belzeri looked at him. "I noticed more than you think. What is that supposed to mean?" Belzeri did not answer. Taram's anger finally appeared. "Stop it!" Everyone looked at her. She turned to her husband. "You disappear. You return. You speak in halves. One man is a thief. Another is a liar. My brother may be both. Your brother hid things from you. You hide things from all of us." She struck the table with the flat of her hand. "I buried you without a body." Her voice broke on the final word. The room became still. "I slept beside your empty place for 7 months. I accused a man I have known since he was 15 years old. I have wondered every night whether your last thought was of me." Belzeri looked down. Taram said, "So stop speaking like a merchant bargaining over dates and tell me why you would not come home." He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "Because somebody from this house sent a man to finish killing me." Nadinu moved toward the door. The guards caught him before he reached it. The stranger with the expensive sandals had not simply asked Kubaba about Belzeri. After leaving the village, he stayed at an inn nearby. Belzeri followed him the next morning. Not closely. The man traveled north. At dusk, he met another rider. They spoke near an abandoned field. Belzeri could not hear everything, but he heard one sentence. "If he remembers the tablets, we're finished." That was when he decided not to return to Babylon. He needed to know who had sent them. The expensive sandaled man eventually led him to a merchant house in Nippur. Belzeri watched for 4 days. On the 5th, a messenger arrived from Babylon. Belzeri recognized the messenger. He worked occasionally for Nadinu. Taram turned toward her brother. Nadinu's face had become gray. She whispered, "You knew he was alive." "No, you knew." "I knew someone survived." Belzeri said, "Me." "I did not know it was you." Belzeri almost smiled. "You sent a man asking for a merchant with my seal." Nadinu stopped. One careless sentence. That was enough. The chief judge said quietly, "Continue." Belzeri did. He followed the messenger, then lost him. He followed another. He learned that somebody in Babylon was paying men along the southern roads to watch for him. So Belzeri did something difficult. He stayed away. Every day he wanted to return. Every day he imagined Taram believing him dead. But if he returned openly, the person who attacked him would know immediately. And Belzeri still did not understand why. The missing silver was not enough. There was something else. He discovered it in Ur. Belzeri had gone there because he remembered the purpose of his original journey. He had been carrying copies of several contracts involving copper. For 3 years, his business had supplied copper to a group of workshops. The quantities in the tablets did not match the quantities arriving. At first, he thought somebody was stealing copper. He was wrong. Somebody was adding copper. Secret shipments. Goods that did not belong to Belzeri were being mixed with his caravans and sold under his name. His family business was being used to hide trade that never appeared in the official records. Belzeri's good reputation was the cover. Shamash Etir said, "Why?" "To avoid taxes and debts." "Whose goods?" Belzeri looked at Nadinu. "His." Taram sat very still. Her brother shook his head. "No." Belzeri said, "Mushalim taught you. You cannot prove any of this." "I can." Belzeri turned toward the door. "Bring in the boy." A guard left. When he returned, he was followed by a thin young man of perhaps 17. Taram knew him. Everyone in the warehouse knew him. His name was Dagon. He swept floors, carried tablets between rooms, and slept behind the northern storeroom. Nadinu stared at him. "You?" Dagon looked frightened. Belzeri said, "Tell them." The boy swallowed. When Master Belzeri disappeared, Master Nadinu told me to burn some old tablets. Nadinu shouted, "He is lying." The guards held him. Dagon continued, "I did burn them." Belzeri said, "All of them?" "No." "Why not?" The boy looked embarrassed. "One had a drawing on the back." The judge frowned. "A drawing?" "A donkey." For the first time that morning, Shamash Etir smiled. Dagon loved drawing donkeys. On walls, on broken pottery, on discarded tablets, usually very bad donkeys. This particular tablet had been an account Nadinu wanted destroyed. Dagon had taken it because there was an unusually good donkey scratched onto the reverse. He kept it under his sleeping mat. Months later, he showed it to Shamash Etir. That happened before Shamash Etir's arrest. Shamash Etir saw the account. He understood immediately that goods were passing through the warehouse without Belzeri's knowledge. Then he did something foolish. He confronted Nadinu. Alone. Belzeri turned toward his brother. "That was the other thing you hid from me." Shamash Etir said nothing. "You knew." "I suspected." "And you said nothing." "You were missing." "You could have told Taram." Shamash Etir glanced at her. "I thought her husband had been murdered, and I was going to tell her that her brother might be involved?" "Yes." "I wanted proof." Belzeri stared at him. Shamash Etir lifted both hands. "You stayed dead for 7 months because you wanted proof." Kubaba coughed into her hand to hide a laugh. Even Belzeri could not argue with that. The chief judge said, "What happened when you confronted Nadinu?" Shamash Etir looked at him. "He cried." Taram closed her eyes again. "He told me he had made mistakes. He said Belzeri discovered some of them before leaving and had threatened to destroy him. He begged me to give him time." Belzeri said, "And you did." "Yes." "Why?" "Because father liked him." Their dead father had now caused trouble twice. Belzeri looked toward the ceiling. "He has become very generous since dying." Shamash Etir laughed. A few others did too. Even Taram almost did. It lasted only a moment. Then Dagon said something nobody expected. "That isn't everything." Nadinu turned toward him sharply. Dagon stepped closer to a guard. "What else?" asked the judge. The night before Master Shamash Etir was arrested, Master Nadinu came to the warehouse. Taram looked at her brother. Dagon continued. "He had something wrapped in cloth." "What?" "I didn't know." Dagon hesitated. "But later I saw where he put it." Shamash Etir understood first. "My belt." Dagon nodded. The blood-stained belt. The evidence that had convinced Taram. Nadinu had planted it. Taram rose. She looked at her brother as if she were seeing someone wearing Nadinu's face. "Whose blood?" Nadinu did not answer. Belzeri did. "Mine." Taram turned. "How?" Belzeri reached toward the scar on his head. "The men who attacked me took my cloak, my pouch, my sandals, anything that could make a dead man seem more dead. One of them brought the blood? They brought cloth soaked with it." Shamash Etir stared at Nadinu. "You were going to have me killed." "No. If Belzeri stayed dead, I would have been judged for murder." "I did not know they would execute you." Shamash Etir stepped toward him. The guards blocked his way. Nadinu shouted, "I was trying to save myself." Nobody answered, perhaps because there was nothing to say. Nadinu looked at Taram. "Sister." She moved away. That seemed to frighten him more than the guards. Taram. She would not look at him. I did not mean to kill Belzeri. Belzeri said, then your men misunderstood you badly. I told them to frighten you. With stones? I told them to stop you reaching Ur. One of them struck my skull. I was not there. No. Belzeri nodded. That is true. Nadinu saw a small opening. I never ordered murder. You only paid men to attack me on an empty road. I was desperate. Belzeri looked at him. I know. There was no anger in his voice. That somehow made it worse. Nadinu's eyes filled. I thought if you reached Ur, you would find everything. I did. You would take the business from me. It was never yours. You would report me. Yes. You would ruin Taram's family. Belzeri's expression changed. Taram is my family. Nadinu looked at his sister. At last, she looked back. He said, I did all of it because I was tired of asking. Nobody understood. Nadinu gave a strange little laugh. All my life, I asked. For what? Taram said. For everything. He pointed toward Belzeri and Shamashatir. They were born into warehouses, boats, land, contracts. Men bowed when their father entered a room. Shamashatir said, Our father worked until his hands split. Yes, and then you inherited what his hands built. Nadinu touched his own chest. What did my father leave me? 2 rugs and a leaking roof. Taram whispered, He left you us. Nadinu looked at her. For the first time, he seemed ashamed, but only for a moment. You married Belzeri. Suddenly, everyone treated me like I had become somebody. So you stole from him? I wanted 1 caravan. You had one. Mushalim cheated me. So you cheated us? I needed to recover. You let Shamashatir steal money for you. He offered. I did not, Shamashatir said. You begged my dying father. Nadinu turned on him, and you enjoyed saving me. Shamashatir stopped. That accusation landed, because part of it was true. Nadinu saw it. You always liked being the generous one, the reckless younger brother who gives silver away because he does not have to count it. Shamash-Etir looked at the floor. Nadinu turned to Belzeri. And you liked forgiving people exactly once. Belzeri's jaw tightened. You gave a man 1 mistake, maybe 2 if you loved him. After that, you looked at him as though he were rotten grain. Taram said, Enough. But Nadinu continued, You all want a monster. There isn't one. He looked around the room. There is only a man who lied because the truth became too expensive. Belzeri said quietly, And when the lie became expensive, Nadinu looked at him. You tried to make someone else pay. That ended it. The guards took Nadinu away. Taram did not watch him leave. Everyone expected the matter to end there. It did not, because the chief judge still had questions. First, Nadinu had confessed only to arranging an attack, not to ordering murder. Second, one of the attackers was still unidentified. Third, someone had intercepted Belzeri's clay message to Shamashatir. And fourth, Nadinu had not created the forged inheritance tablet himself. He could barely write. Someone else had made it. Someone with access to Belzeri's seal. That seal was currently on Belzeri's hand, but copies could be made from impressions. The judge held up the false tablet. Who made this? Nadinu was brought back. He refused to answer. The judge asked again. Nadinu remained silent. Belzeri suddenly said, I know. Taram turned toward him. Belzeri looked at her. Bring your marriage chest. My what? The cedar chest in our room. Taram stared at him. Why? Please. It was the first time all morning he had spoken to her gently. She sent a servant. While they waited, nobody spoke much. Kubaba ate 3 dates she had somehow brought in her sleeve. Eventually, the servant returned carrying a small cedar chest. Taram opened it. Inside were old letters, a bracelet, 2 combs, a child's tiny wool shoe that had never been worn. Belzeri saw it. His eyes remained there for a moment. Years earlier, Taram had lost a child before birth. She had made the shoe too early. Afterward, she had refused to throw it away. Belzeri reached past it and lifted several tablets tied together with cord. Our marriage agreements. Taram nodded. He removed one. Your dowry inventory. Yes. He placed it beside the forged inheritance tablet. Look at the edge. The judge did. Nothing. Belzeri said, Not the writing, the clay. The judge turned it sideways. There was a shallow notch near one corner. He checked the dowry tablet. The same notch. Taram frowned. So? Belzeri said, The scribe who prepared our marriage tablets cuts his clay with a chipped bronze knife. The judge looked toward the group of scribes. An older man near the wall had gone very still. Taram recognized him. Iltani. He had been her family's scribe since before her marriage. He had prepared her dowry tablets. He had also been the man Taram asked to examine the inheritance tablet. The man who told her Belzeri's seal was authentic. The guards closed the doors. Iltani said, Many knives are chipped. Belzeri nodded. Yes. The scribe relaxed slightly. Belzeri added, But not many scribes make the sign for 60 backward. Iltani's eyes dropped toward the tablet. Shamashatir smiled without humor. There. The judge examined the numbers. Then the older marriage tablet. The same peculiar mark. Iltani began backing toward the wall. The judge said, Stay where you are. Taram stared at him. You told me the tablet was real. Iltani said nothing. You watched me accuse Shamashatir. Still nothing. She stepped toward him. Why? Iltani looked at Nadinu. Nadinu looked away. That was answer enough. But Iltani's story held one final turn. He had not helped Nadinu for silver. Not at first. Years earlier, Iltani's son had borrowed from Mushalim. When the fraudulent caravan collapsed, the son fled Babylon to escape his creditors. Nadinu knew where he had gone. Nadinu used that knowledge. He told Iltani, Forge the tablet or your son's creditors will find him. Intercept messages arriving for Shamashatir, or they will find him. Say the seal is genuine, or they will find him. Iltani obeyed, and every obedience made the next one easier to demand. When the judge asked why he did not simply tell the truth after Shamashatir was arrested, the old scribe began crying. Because by then, he said, the truth would also condemn me. Kubaba stopped eating. Belzeri looked at Nadinu. There. Nadinu said nothing. The lie became expensive. Nadinu lowered his head. The words had returned to him. Only now they belonged to someone else. By late afternoon, Shamash Atir was formally released. People expected him to embrace his brother. Instead, he walked past him. Belzeri followed. Shamash. His brother kept walking. Shamash. He finally stopped near the steps. You could have sent word. I tried. One message. Yes. When it failed, you tried another? Belzeri said nothing. Shamash Atir laughed. Of course not. I did not know who to trust. You could trust me. I found 23 shekels missing. So you thought I might have tried to murder you? I thought you were hiding something. I was. Shamash Atir turned toward him. I stole from our business to honor our father's stupid promise. I lied to you. I confronted Nadinu alone. These were foolish things. He stepped closer. But I did not leave you waiting for judgment while I stood outside the city counting mysteries. Belzeri accepted that without defending himself. Shamash Atir's anger weakened slightly, because anger likes resistance. You knew today was my judgment? Yes. How? Dagon sent word. Shamash Atir looked toward the boy. So you waited until today? Belzeri shook his head. No, I reached Babylon last night. Shamash Atir stared at him. You were here? Outside the wall. Why didn't you come in? The gates were closed. For several seconds, Shamash Atir simply looked at him. Then he began laughing. Not bitterly this time. Actually laughing. Belzeri did too. After 7 months of accusations, false tablets, blood, betrayal, and attempted murder, the great final reason Belzeri had not saved his brother sooner was that he had reached Babylon after sunset, and the gatekeeper would not open the gate. Shamash Atir wiped his face. I hate you. I know. You look terrible. I know. Your beard makes you look like a goat trader. So I have been told. Shamash Atir looked at the scar on his brother's head. His laughter stopped. He touched it once, carefully, then dropped his hand. Did you think I did it? Belzeri answered slowly. On some nights. Shamash Atir looked hurt. On others, I thought Taram did. His brother blinked. Taram? She knew my routes. She knew when I left. She had access to my seal. And you came home? I missed her. Shamash Atir shook his head. You are an idiot. I know. Then the brothers embraced. Not beautifully. Shamash Atir hit the wound by mistake. Belzeri cursed. Shamash Atir apologized, then laughed again. And because families often behave badly during important moments, Belzeri shoved him. They nearly fell down the courthouse steps. Taram did not go home with her husband. That surprised everyone except Belzeri. She went to her mother's house. For 3 days, she refused to see him. On the 4th, Belzeri came anyway. Taram's mother told him her daughter was not receiving visitors. Belzeri said, I am not a visitor. Her mother looked at him. For 7 months you were worse. You were a ghost. Then she closed the door. Belzeri sat on the step. By evening, a servant brought him water. That gave him hope. By midnight, nothing else happened. He slept against the wall. In the morning, someone poured dirty washing water from the roof and missed his head by less than a hand. Belzeri looked up. Taram was standing there. Was that meant for me? No. He looked at the completely dry street around him. All right. She disappeared. He stayed. Near noon, she finally came downstairs. She sat on the opposite side of the courtyard. Belzeri did not approach. Taram said, "Why would you think I wanted you dead?" He answered because lying had caused enough trouble. Because you would inherit part of my property. That is your reason? No. What else? You asked me to stop traveling. Because you nearly died twice from fever. You were unhappy. I was lonely. You and Nadinu whispered often. He was my brother. I know that now. She stared at him. You did not know it then? Belzeri had no useful answer. Taram looked away. For a while they listened to a woman in the next house arguing with someone about lentils. Finally, Taram said, I accused Shamashatir. Yes. I did not merely suspect him. I stood in public and called him a murderer. You had evidence. I wanted the evidence to be true. Belzeri looked at her. She rubbed her thumb across her palm. Do you understand? Perhaps. If he killed you, I could hate him. Belzeri waited. If nobody killed you, if you simply disappeared, then every day I had to wonder whether you were somewhere alive and choosing not to come home. Belzeri looked down. Taram said, So when they found the belt, I felt relief. That word sounded ugly between them. She continued, And then I hated myself for feeling it. Belzeri folded his hands. I was alive. I know. And I was choosing not to come home. I know. Not because I wanted to leave you. I know why. That does not make it kind. No. He looked surprised. Taram almost smiled. You thought I would say it did? I hoped. You have always had unreasonable hopes. They sat quietly. Then Belzeri reached into his robe. He placed something on the floor between them. A tiny wool shoe. Taram stopped breathing. You took that from the chest. Yes. Why? I don't know. She picked it up. The wool had faded. I made 2. Belzeri nodded. I know. Where is the other? He took the second from his robe. Taram stared at him. You have been carrying both. For 4 days. Why? I still don't know. That was the first moment she cried. Not when he walked through the gate, not in the courthouse, not when her brother was arrested. Now. Over 2 tiny shoes made years before, for a child who had never worn them. Belzeri moved closer. She did not stop him. He sat beside her. They did not speak for a long time. Then Taram said, I cannot go home yet. All right. I don't know when. All right. You cannot sit outside my mother's house every day. All right. She looked at him. You are going to. Yes. She shook her head. And for the first time since his return, she leaned against him. only for a moment, but it was enough for that day. Nadinu's judgment came several weeks later. He was found guilty of fraud, theft, conspiracy, and arranging the attack on Belzeri. The question of attempted murder was harder. One attacker was eventually found. He claimed Nadinu had ordered them only to steal Belzeri's documents and frighten him into returning to Babylon. The second attacker had struck Belzeri after he resisted. Whether Nadinu truly intended his death could not be proven. It changed little. Much of Nadinu's property was seized. Part went to his creditors, part to restitution. He was sentenced to years of forced labor on royal canal works far from Babylon. Taram attended the judgment. When Nadinu was led past her, he stopped. The guard tried to move him. Taram raised one hand. She wanted one question. Why Shamashatir? Nadinu looked confused. Why frame him? He looked toward the ground. Because people would believe it. Taram waited. Nadinu added, and because he knew too much. There was more. She could see it. Tell me. Nadinu looked at her. I was jealous of him. Shamash Atir? He could waste 23 shekels trying to save me and still sleep at night. Taram said nothing. He was born careless because somebody always caught him. You think that is why he helped you? No. Nadinu smiled sadly. That is what made me hate him. Taram understood. Shamashatir had helped Nadinu when helping him was foolish. Nadinu had answered kindness with resentment because kindness reminded him that he needed it. The guard pulled him onward. Nadinu took 2 steps, then turned. Sister. Taram waited. I am sorry. She looked at him. For weeks she had imagined this moment. Sometimes she spat at him. Sometimes she cursed him. Sometimes she forgave him beautifully. Now that it had arrived, none of those things felt true. So she said only, I know, and let him go. Winter came. The family business survived, although barely. Several merchants stopped dealing with Belzeri after learning their goods had been mixed with smuggled copper. Some returned when the investigation cleared his name. Others did not. Shamashatir sold a small piece of land to replace the 23 shekels he had taken. Belzeri told him he did not need to repay all of it. Shamashatir replied, You have become very generous since being dead. Belzeri made him repay every shekel. Dagon was promoted from sweeping floors to assisting the warehouse scribes. Within a month, little donkeys began appearing in the corners of official inventory tablets. Belzeri pretended not to notice. Kubaba returned to selling dates near the courthouse. For the rest of her life, she told anyone willing to listen that she had once saved one of Babylon's great merchants because she recognized the criminal quality of expensive sandals. The story improved every year. Eventually, according to Kubaba, she personally fought 3 assassins with a cooking spoon. Belzeri never corrected her. Iltani, the old scribe, received a lighter punishment after helping the judges reconstruct Nadinu's false accounts. His son returned to Babylon several years later. They did not speak for the first 3 days. On the 4th, somebody saw them eating together. That was considered enough. And Taram? She returned home in the 2nd month of winter. She did not announce it. Belzeri came back from the warehouse one evening and found her sitting in the courtyard sorting lentils. He stopped in the doorway. Taram looked up. "What?" "Nothing." "You are staring." "I know." "Then stop." He did. He entered. She had moved only a few things back. One chest, 2 robes, some kitchen bowls. Belzeri was wise enough not to ask whether she was staying forever. That night, they ate together. Halfway through the meal, Taram said, "I found something." Belzeri put down his cup. Those words had caused enough difficulty in his life. "What?" She went to the chest and returned with a small clay token. Belzeri stared at it. On one side was a crude drawing, a little boat. His message to Shamash Atir, the one that never arrived. "Where did you get this?" "In Nadinu's house." Belzeri took it. "Where?" "Inside a jar of old tablets." He turned it over. There was something scratched onto the back. Not by Belzeri. 2 short lines. Taram said, "Read it." He did. The writing belonged to Iltani, the old scribe. It said, "The wounded man lives. Nadinu knows. Burn this." Belzeri read it twice. So Iltani intercepted it. Yes, but he did not burn it. No? Why? Taram shrugged. Perhaps he thought he might need proof one day. Belzeri looked at the little boat. A frightened old man had been ordered to destroy the one object that could have saved Shamash Atir. Instead, he had hidden it, a cowardly act, and perhaps, in its small way, a brave one. Taram watched her husband. "You spent 7 months wondering whom you could trust." "Yes." "And?" He looked at her. "And what?" "Have you decided?" Belzeri leaned back. "No." Taram frowned. He continued, "I think that was my mistake." "What was?" "Believing people belong in 2 jars." She waited. The trustworthy ones and the untrustworthy ones. Taram looked amused. "That sounds like something a scribe would say. I dislike scribes now. Dagon is becoming one. Then I dislike one fewer." She smiled. Belzeri looked again at the token. "My brother stole from me and would probably die for me." Taram nodded. "Your brother tried to have me attacked and once sat beside you all night when you thought I was dead." Her smile disappeared. Iltani betrayed us and preserved the evidence of his own betrayal. "Yes." "And you?" Belzeri looked at her. "What about me?" "You loved me and left me believing you were dead for 7 months." He had no answer. Taram took the token from his hand. "No clean jars?" "No." She turned the clay boat between her fingers. Then she suddenly laughed. Belzeri frowned. "What? You really drew this?" "Yes. It looks like a fish." "It is a boat. It has an eye. That is a hole for a rope. It is a fish. Shamash Atir would know it. He would think it was the fish you hit him with as a child." "I hit him with a boat." "You told me he hit you." "He did first." Taram stared at him. "After all these years, I finally discover the truth." "About what?" You started it." Belzeri smiled. "Perhaps." She placed the token on a shelf. It remained there for many years. Belzeri never again traveled without telling Taram exactly where he was going. Taram never again accepted a sealed tablet merely because the seal appeared genuine. Shamash-Etir became considerably more careful with money, although not careful enough to satisfy his brother. And Dagon eventually became the chief scribe of the family business. He stopped drawing donkeys on important tablets. Mostly. There was one final matter. Years later, after Belzeri's hair had begun to turn gray, a young merchant once asked him why the lion seal on his ring had a small crack down its side. Belzeri looked at it. The crack had appeared during the attack on the road to Ur. For years he had considered replacing the stone. He never did. He told the young merchant, "Because once a man copied this lion perfectly and nearly destroyed my family." The young merchant examined the seal. "Then why keep it?" Belzeri smiled. "Because he copied it perfectly." The young man did not understand. Belzeri said, "He copied the lion. He copied the border. He copied every line. He turned the ring, but he forgot the crack." The inheritance tablet that had convinced Taram to accuse Shamash-Etir had been sealed with a perfect lion. Belzeri's real seal had already been cracked before he left Babylon. He had noticed it the night before his journey. He had even complained about it at dinner. Taram had forgotten. Belzeri had forgotten. Shamash-Etir had never seen it. And Iltani, working from an older impression, could not have known. The smallest thing in the entire affair had been present from the beginning, a hairline crack in a black stone. If any one of them had noticed it, Shamash-Etir might never have gone to prison. But then, Nadinu's fraud might not have been uncovered. Belzeri might have returned too early. Iltani might have burned the little boat. And the truth might have remained divided among several people, with none possessing enough of it to understand the whole. The young merchant asked, "So the cracked seal saved you?" Belzeri considered this. "No." "What did?" Belzeri looked across the warehouse. Shamash-Etir was arguing with Dagon over an account. Taram was speaking to a supplier near the courtyard. On the shelf behind her sat a small clay token shaped by a wounded man's hand many years before. Belzeri said, "People who told the truth too late." The young merchant waited for something wiser. Belzeri had nothing wiser. So he returned to his accounts. And above him, pressed into the wet clay of a newly finished tablet, was the mark of a lion with a crack running through its side.